Yo, what is up, guys? Will here with Canyon from Fantasy Basketball Flock, and we've got some waiver wire ads for this week. Before we get into this, obviously, real prerequisite, always be checking your waiver wires every day. I mean, sometimes there are players that are dropped that should not be dropped at all. We get questions in the live streams about, should I drop this player? And we're like, no, you do not drop the struggling rookie who's playing 30 plus minutes. So I think that's one thing I do want to call out. And as always, the guys we're going to talk about a lot are dealing with some injuries to the team. That's opening up opportunity and usage for them. And as always, a place you can really take advantage of that. It's on Underdog Fantasy NBA player props. If you want 100% deposit match up to $100 using code Canyon, make some NBA player prop cards. If you're playing your fantasy matchup and you just want to, play the stars, play some guys who have good opportunities and good usage for the night, good matchups. Always love Underdog. But let's get right into it. First guy I want to talk about is Walker Kessler, who's had a pretty strong December. In 6 games in December, he's averaging 10 points, 10 boards, averaging a double-double, and 2.7 blocks in only 22 minutes. Now he's gotten his first career start here. He's returned to the bench. It's kind of been, it seemed like we've had the opportunity for him to be playing starter minutes. Hasn't really happened, but I think that if Kessler is a guy who is stepping into potentially 26, 27, 28 minutes per game playing that kind of starter role, I really like him because his per minute stats specifically have been really strong, specifically in rebounding and blocks for sure. So he's one of those guys who, I think he has a really strong floor if he starts to see that jump. And I think he's a guy who's even worth rostering at this point, because if he is just going to play 22, 24 minutes and give you this per minute production, definitely a guy who needs to be rostered.
Yeah, we're getting to that time frame, right, too, where the rookies are sneaking into getting more time, getting more acclimated with the league. And, second half of the season, we could definitely see guys like Kessler become more effective. Next up here, we've got Onyeka Okongwu. Capella out tonight for part of the game with that a new injury, right calf tightness. Enter the game with a Achilles soreness, so he's banged up, and Onyeka Okongwu is going to be the direct recipient to several minutes there. And this is a guy that's been pretty efficient and effective in limited minutes behind Capella. He comes in and is very productive, a great energizer off the bench for them. And I think without Capella there, if he can get 30 to 35 minutes a game, he can be a real fantasy productive asset for you guys if he's still on the waiver wire. He's going to be a guy that's going to be close to a double-double. He's averaging about 9 and 8 without Capella on his career and about 5 and 6 with him. And he's really coming into his own at the tail end of last season and in this season. And so, we've seen him in games where he plays like 20 to 25 minutes and he's flirting with double-doubles. And so now he should have a really good opportunity in front of him to be that sole number 5 for the Hawks. And I think he can be a night in and night out, flirting with double-doubles. So I think Okongwu is a fantastic ad if you can scoop him off the waivers with this Capella news. Depending on how long he's out, we're still waiting to hear about the severity of that injury. But Okongwu is going to be an immediate rebound and blocks guy with some points upside as well. So I think he's got to be definitely a guy that you look out for.
For sure. And next up, another guy who is his teammate or a guy you would call the starter, DeAndre Ayton. The waiver wire guy is Bismack Biyombo. So Ayton had left with the ankle injury. That's something we've seen him deal with previously. Now the expectation is he's back soon, so it might just be a 1 or 2 game stream. But I think Bismack specifically in a category league, I think he gives you really solid block upside. I know it's kind of a weird call out, but in category leagues, a lot of times in situations, if you can get 1 or 2 games from a guy off the waiver wire that can really give you a boost in those kind of really specialized categories. Bismack this season, now it's not something you should expect, but in 2 games without Ayton this season, he's averaging 4.5 blocks. Now, the other numbers, 6.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, don't sound too appealing. I totally get that. But if you look back to last season, Bismack had a stretch of 13 games without Ayton, averaged 12, 8, gave you an assist, and averaged just over a block per game. So I think he's a guy who definitely could give you upside, and he's probably going to play like 25, 26 minutes. I know Jacques Landale is a guy that, people might look to has more offensive upside, but I think Bismack is the one they trust more and is more certainly going to play more minutes. So he's the one I do want to lean to. In deeper leads, I think, Landale's a guy who's definitely worth the ad, but specifically Bismack, I think if Ayton were to miss a stretch of games, if it's even just 1 or 2, he might be able to put you over the edge in some of those special categories.
Definitely. Next up here, we've got Andrew Nembhard for the Pacers, a guy that kind of, sprung onto the scene a little bit with a, injury to a teammate in Halliburton and had a really good game, of course, against the Warriors, that game that he had. But even with Halliburton back, back, he's still in the lineup, starting lineup, playing a lot of minutes, and that's why I think he's a really big value in a must waiver add for this week. He's playing like 30 minutes or more almost every single game in December here. The stats aren't going to be as good as they were without Halliburton, but it's what you're looking for is those 30 plus minutes per game in the starting lineup for a Pacers team that's a high paced team. He'll have some usage. He'll have some games with shots, 10 or more shots, but he gets involved in the passing game as well. Pacers passed the most in any team in the league last season, and they're continuing to do that again this season. So Nembhard can definitely give you scoring upside, assist upside, a stout defender and rebounder, just a really good guard for the Pacers here. And, with Halliburton being back in the lineup and his still playing all these minutes and having this usage makes him even more of a valuable asset because, it shows that there's not going to be a fall off anytime soon for his value. So if Nembhard is still on the waiver wire, I definitely would pick him up.
For sure. Next up here, got Dante DiVincenzo for the Warriors. Now, Steph left this game with a shoulder injury. Might miss time, obviously. A lot of these injuries were for games tonight, so we don't really have the reports that are how long-term is this. So, a little dependent on how much time he's going to miss. DiVincenzo stepped in, had a really solid game. 15 points, 8 boards, 3 assists. He's had pretty good assist numbers per minute this season, averaging 4 assists in only 19 minutes. Obviously, there was no Clay tonight and no Wiggins, but I still think DiVincenzo is one of those guys that, if we do see the minutes increase as kind of that secondary guard, right? Obviously, you expect Poole to kind of step into that starter role for Steph. I think DiVincenzo, we saw it last season with the Kings, and I think we can, we've seen bits and pieces of it this season with the Warriors when he has gotten, the bump in minutes and he's played closer to 27, 28, depending on how the games have gone. I think he's one of those guys that can give you, decent assist numbers, okay rebounding numbers for a guard, and points for sure for a guy like that. I think I swapped there. I think his rebounding numbers have been pretty good. The assist numbers have kind of been okay. But no, I think he's one of those guys where if we do see Steph miss a significant amount of time, he's going to step in and have an increased role.
Yeah, we've seen him thrive off the bench in several different teams. He's been bounced around the league for a few teams for the past couple of years. So this is a guy that we've seen fill in roles and be a really productive guy off the bench or in the starter role if he has to. So I love that call out. Next up here, we've got Jordan Goodwin, a guy that's really helped fill in for the Beal injury for the Wizards in that point guard spot. He's been very, very efficient and a very solid, statistically solid point guard with Beal being out. Great defensively, good assist upside, good scoring upside. Beal probably won't be out too long. But I think it's interesting to keep an eye on him, at least even with Beal back. I think he could still be a productive asset for this team off the bench defensively and passing wise. But as long as Beal is out, he's a must add. If he's still on your waiver wire somehow and Beal continues to miss some time with a lingering injury, Goodwin's, clearly the guy that's stepping up and producing some solid fantasy production for that role. So I like Goodwin a lot, but again, Beal should be coming back here soon, so keep an eye on that. I still think he's worth the ad, even if Beal comes back. Keep an eye on him. He's still worth a shout because he has been coming out of the scene, pretty strong here. He only started playing this season in November, anyways. So I think he can still be a productive asset with Beal back in this lineup.
Definitely. Next up here, I know a lot of these guys have felt pretty dependent on injuries ahead of them that are opening up new opportunities. But, I think this guy, even with a team that's dealt with some injuries, I think he still has a strong role. It's Mason Plumlee. I know it's not the sexiest name, right? You don't feel like there's a lot of upside with that kind of guy, but man, he's just going to play like 28-ish minutes and, almost average 10 and 10. And he's giving you actually pretty decent assist numbers this season too. I think people would be surprised to see that a guy like Mason Plumlee's averaging like 4 assists this season. So he's not super sexy. He's only rostered in 60% of leagues. And guys like Plumlee that are just going to play 28 minutes and are probably going to give you 8-9 rebounds a night and can give you scoring upside. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like he gives you a ton, but he's one of those guys that just has a strong enough floor that he probably just should be rostered in most leagues.
Yeah, he's kind of like Al Horford, right? He kind of does it all. Good rebounder, good passer, good defender. Not going to look the best doing it, but he definitely feels a stat sheet for sure. Last here, we've got Quentin Grimes. This might be one for some deeper teams, or maybe it's just an early call, because Quentin Grimes has started to have some really nice games here. I mean, he hasn't been fantastic this season, obviously, but if you look at it, his minutes are up a lot. Cam Reddish is injured, and so he's filling in for that kind of wing, kind of Cam Reddish role off the bench. But also, even when Cam Reddish was questionable or potentially healthy, Thibodeau, seemed to prefer Grimes over Reddish anyway. We've got the trade trade rumors circulating around Cam Reddish going elsewhere. And I think Thibodeau really does give Grimes the nod here. Grimes is a solid player. He was solid last season as well. And I think this is a guy that can, if once he kind of gets his shooting stroke down and continues to see more minutes and continues to be healthy, as long as he's getting this nod from Thibodeau to play those minutes, those Reddish minutes, I think he can be very productive moving forward. If he sees like 30-plus minutes, he's going to give you really good scoring upside. Of course, great three-point shooting upside. Not the greatest peripherals, but, a guy this far down and maybe this wide open on the waivers, someone who can give you 20 points on a night and great 3-point shooting off the bench for the Knicks, especially if anything happens to any of those Knicks starters. Like we see Brunson's already questionable tonight, but he did play. But Grimes looks to be the next guy up off the bench scoring-wise.
Definitely, and I know there might be some names you guys are thinking about that have had stronger starts. We've talked about some guys that are, probably rostered at this point with recent performances. Obviously, the Pistons guys and Killian and Burks specifically, who I know people might not have believed in the scoring, but he's legit, as Pistons fans. Some of the, other injury guys, obviously, with Cat out, and, those Timberwolves guys, Anderson specifically, and then some of the Hawks as well with those injuries. But, some of those guys are returning. But as always, man, if you're watching this video and you're thinking, these guys are way too deep, like they're not going to give me a good floor, you're probably playing in a shallower league. And my thing I would say to you is you need to check your waiver wire every day, because a lot of people in those shallow leagues that are streaming and wanting to drop their worst player end up dropping a player who just needs to be rostered in any league, depending, not even depending on the size. So I think that specifically is a call I want to make for you guys who are in shallower leagues who look at this and go, none of these guys are going to start for me. Like my whole roster's better. I've got way better waiver wire targets. Definitely check that every day. Appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you in the next one.